Happy Monday morning, Facebook. This is your man, Bobby Hesley, coming to you live with a Monday morning walk and talk. Out doing my morning walk and actually gearing up. I'm going to be really excited. I'm going to be on a radio show with Catholic apologist Jesse Romero. I'm going to be on his podcast, Jesus 911. He's a former sheriff deputy in Los Angeles. We're going to be discussing Black Lives Matter and the Marxist communist roots of Black Lives Matter. But in the meantime, I wanted to be with you today to talk about a topic that hits near and dear to me. As you can see, I'm sporting my Black Voices for Trump hat, loudly and proudly. There's no shame in my game. I don't hide from my beliefs. I'm very proud of our president. I'm very proud of everything he's done for the Black community. And as you've seen in my description, I want to go back to a little bit of Black history. History is very important to us Blacks, and I want to give you guys some Black history because I truly believe that the Republican Party has always been the party of the Black man. I believe that the Republican Party is the best friend of the Black man, of the Black American, particularly of the Black fetuses of color, FOCs. And I'm going to give you some history to prove that, guys. Now, number one, we need to look back at the history of the party. So the Democrat Party, just to give you a quick little history, was founded in 1828 by Andrew Jackson. And the Democrat Party is the party of slavery. The Democrat Party is the party of Jim Crow segregation. It's the party of KKK terrorism. It's the party of educational discrimination, housing discrimination, transportation discrimination, systemic racism like the '94 crime bill passed by Joe Biden. The Democrat Party has always been the worst enemy of the Black American. It has always been the worst enemy of the Black man. History is so clear on this point that I'm dumbfounded as to why it's not more obvious. Because I believe that that party has worked very hard to cover up the history of their crimes against Black Americans. But in the early 1860s, right around 1860, 1861, there was a party that was founded in opposition to the Democrat Party. There was a party that rose up in defense of Black Americans, of Black people. And it was a grand old party. You guys ever wonder what the phrase GOP stands for? It stands for Grand Old Party. And what are the roots of the Grand Old Party? The roots of the Grand Old Party is abolition, okay? The Republican Party is the party of abolition. Some of the original pioneers of the Republican Party in the 1860s were Black men. They were Black men like me, outspoken men like me who love the Black community, who love their fellow Blacks, and who wanted to make sure that they had the optimal American experience, that they had the freedom and the opportunity and the liberty that all other Americans have. But the fact is, we had no power, we had no rights back then because we were slaves. So there's no way that a Black man could rise up and become president. So what we had to do is we had to find a white person from the North, because all the white Southerners were racist Democrats. They were racist Dixie Democrats. And we had to find a white man who had the courage and who had the love for Black people to risk his life, limbs, mental health, reputation, career, business, everything in order to stand up for us Black people. And we finally were able to find a man who was willing to paint a big bullseye on the back of his head. And his name was Abraham Lincoln, the first Republican president, the 16th president of the United States, but Republican president number one. He was the very first Republican president. Make sure you guys know who I'm repping here. Black Voices for Trump, baby. Hey, Robin Barnes. So that's who the first Republican president was. Do you guys know what the roots of the Republican Party is? Do you guys know why the Republican Party was established? Allow me to give you some history that Detroit Public Schools hid from me when I was a kid. The Republican Party was established to abolish slavery. The Republican Party is the party of abolition. The Republican Party is the party of Black Lives Matter. Good morning, Jonathan Palmerville. How you doing, brother? My fellow Brightmoor brother from another mother, Jonathan Palmerville, folks. Follow his channel, how he busts illegal dumpers that think that they can come through my old neighborhood and dump their crap all through Brightmoor. Jonathan Palmerville serves up street justice to these people like nobody else does. Make sure you follow him, guys. But the fact is, the original party in America who proclaimed with their actions that Black Lives Matter was the Republican Party in the year 1861. And they were established to abolish slavery. That's right, Robin Barnes. They are the real BLM. The Republican Party is Black Lives Matter 1.0. The Republican Party is the original Black Lives Matter. The Republican Party is the original FUBU 1.0. You guys remember the clothing line FUBU? You know what FUBU stands for? It stands for us, by us. And the Republican Party was established for us, by us. But we had to find a white man who had the power and the freedom and the courage to head up that party, which we found in Abraham Lincoln. And unfortunately, Abraham Lincoln, not too long after winning the Civil War, not too long after passing the proclamation of the Emancipation Proclamation, which officially ended slavery, he ended up being assassinated while attending a play in a movie theater. He was shot point blank in the back of the head. So the very first Republican president, the 16th president of the United States, but the very first Republican president who founded the GOP, the Party of Abolition, was a martyr for black people. Black lives mattered so much to Abraham Lincoln that his white life didn't matter to him. He was willing to sacrifice his white lives because Abraham Lincoln was the very first president to believe and to proclaim that Black lives matter. He wanted to put an end to slavery, and he did it. But unfortunately, in putting an end to slavery, he also put an end to his own life. And it was the Democrat Party that fought tooth and nail to keep black people as slaves. It was the Democrat Party that was willing to go to war. Guys, you have to realize, slavery was ended by white Northerners. Slavery was ended with the Civil War. Did you guys know that the Civil War, that there were over 620,000 deaths in the Civil War? That's more deaths than World War II, World War I, the Korean War, the Vietnam War. The bloodiest war that America ever fought, where more soldiers and more American lives were ended, was when we went to war with ourselves in the Civil War. And that's why the United States of America is the greatest country in the history of the world. Why? Because all the other empires throughout history, all the other superpowers throughout history, going all the way back to Egypt, if you read the book of Exodus, Egypt was an ancient empire built on slavery, built on the backs of Hebrew slaves, of the Israelite slaves. The Greek Empire had slaves and was built on slavery. The Roman Empire, the Persian Empire, the Babylonian Empire, the Ottoman Empire. If you go all throughout history, every major superpower, every major empire throughout history was built on slavery. The United States of America is no different. The United States of America is the greatest superpower to ever be built on slavery. But here's what makes the United States different than all the other superpowers throughout history that were built on slavery. And that difference is this. The United States of America is the only slavery-based superpower that went to war with itself to end slavery. The United States of America is the only empire in history that was willing to tear itself from half, from north to south, and risk its future as a nation to put an end to slavery. Show me another empire that was willing to commit suicide against itself in order to end slavery. And you're going to come up short because you're never going to find one. And that is why the United States of America is the greatest country in history. There are many people who say that the original sin of America is slavery, and I agree with that. But we dealt with our original sin. We went to war with ourselves and we put an end to it. And what happened is, when slavery ended, black were very much like the sojourners when slavery ended in Egypt. When the Jews, when the power of Pharaoh was broken over the Jews, they were orphaned. They were wanderers in the desert. They had no place to call home. Black Americans were very similar when our slavery ended. When the American pharaohs lost their power. When the American pharaohs finally let my people go, thanks to the Republican Party, thanks to Abraham Lincoln, thanks to the very first Black Lives Matter president in history, we were sojourners, we were orphans, we had no place to call home. You know who the first and only party was to welcome us home, to open their doors to us, to invite us in, to give us a place at the table in America? I'll tell you exactly who it was. It was the GOP, the Grand Old Party, the Republican Party, was the very first party and the only party that invited us with open arms. The very party that liberated us from the power of the Democrat pharaohs who kept us in slavery for centuries also welcomed us with open arms into that party. So the very first party that we belonged to was the Republican Party. Now, I want you guys, when you get some time, to look up the Reconstruction era. The very first time that us blacks had rights to become senators, to have positions of power in our country, was in the Republican Party. The Republican Party was the very first party to grant power to black people, political power, to where we were senators, we were House, we were members of Congress. The very first black politicians were Republican politicians, folks. They weren't Democrat politicians. You know why? Because the Democrat Party was still too busy being butthurt over the fact that they lost us as slaves. And the Democrat Party did everything they could to enslave us in other ways. They were not able to enslave us legally anymore. They were no longer able to enslave us economically. So you know what they did? They came up with schemes to enslave us mentally, to terrorize us. That's why they founded the KKK. It was the terrorist wing of the Democrat Party. Because the Democrats said, you know what, you no good N-words? You know what we're going to do to you? Since we lost our power you over slavery? Yeah, you may have some freedom, in quotes. We're going to let you guys think you're free, but you know what we're going to do? We're going to intimidate you. We're going to burn your churches down. We're going to burn your schools down. We're going to burn your businesses down. We're going to bomb your homes in the middle of the night and burn crucifixes on your lawn. Because if you can't be our slaves, then we're damn sure going to make sure that you're afraid and you're intimidated. We're going to do everything we can to make sure you can enjoy this freedom that our Republican foes won for you. But there was a Republican Party that gave us the power to fight that back. The very first anti-KKK laws that were passed in the United States were passed by Republican congressmen, black Republican congressmen. I've coined a phrase that's starting to go viral, and I mean it from the bottom of my heart. I'm not just trying to be gimmicky, but I truly believe that the blackest thing that you can do, if you're an African American, the blackest thing that you can do is vote Republican. I believe that the most American thing that you can do is vote Republican. If you as a black person decide to vote for Republican, if you decide to vote for Donald Trump on November 3rd, you don't have to make it everybody's business who you vote for. You could do it in secret if you want. But the fact is, I want you to be assured that if you vote Republican, you are returning to your black American roots. You are returning to the party that was founded for us, by us. It's the most American thing you could do. I truly believe that it is un-American and it is un-black to vote Democrat. It truly is. Because the fact is, after slavery ended, a handful of decades later, Jim Crow showed up. Jim Crow legislation showed up. And Jim Crow legislation was the Democrat Party's backup plan to keep us enslaved, to prevent us from enjoying the freedom that the Republicans won for us. Well, who was it that fought for us to end Jim Crow legislation? Well, let's do it through process of elimination. Let's use some deductive reasoning to find out who that was. Who was it who fought hardest to preserve Jim Crow legislation? Who was it that fought efforts to overturn and to ban Jim Crow legislation all throughout history? It was the Democrat Party. For example, the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was filibustered on the Senate floor by 14 Democrat senators. James William Albright was one of these Democrat senators who Bill Clinton cited as one of his mentors in his autobiography. You want to know who another Democrat senator who filibustered the Civil Rights Act, who fought Dr. Martin Luther King tooth and nail to prevent that act from being passed? Albert Gore Sr., the grandfather of global warming. Because you know Al Gore was the father of global warming and the father of the internet. So the grandfather of global warming, the father of Al Gore Jr., was one of 14 Democrat senators who opposed the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which was a bill that was designed to give us voting rights and to give us the equality that women had received a few decades prior with the 19th Amendment when they were allowed to vote. The father of Al Gore opposed it. And there's a litany of 14 Democrat senators who opposed it. You know who passed this bill? You know who worked in conjunction with Dr. King, Dr. Martin Luther King, to get the Civil Rights Bill of 1964 passed? A Republican Congress. 100 years later, almost to the year, 1865, you had a Republican Congress headed up by a Republican President, Abraham Lincoln, who ended slavery, who ended the economic slavery. And then almost 100 years later, in 1964, you had a Republican Congress that was able to overcome the 14 racist Democrat senators who filibustered the 1964 Civil Rights Act, and they passed it. Lyndon B. Johnson signed it, although he signed it grudgingly. He didn't want to sign it. There's a whole history behind Lyndon B. Johnson that I'll get into on another video. He was not our friend. When he passed the Great Society, when he passed the War on Poverty legislation that created the modern day welfare state, he was not our friend when he did that. I'll do a whole nother video on that. But the fact is, 100 years later, you still have the same old Republican Party, the same grand old party fighting for the rights of black Americans. 100 years later, you still had the same old Democrat Party fighting for the slavery of America, fighting for the segregation of black Americans, fighting to keep black Americans away from the table of equality and civil rights. Now, let's fast forward another half a century after that. 1965, do a little bit of math. What year is 50 years after 1965? 2015. What happened in 2015, folks? Let's go back in the time machine. I'll tell you exactly what happened in 2015, 50 years after the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was passed. There was a guy up in New York, a real estate entrepreneur, who has this tower named Trump Tower, who came down his escalator and made an announcement that he is going to run for president of the United States. And his name was Donald J. Trump. A half a century after the landmark civil rights legislation that the party of Lincoln, Roosevelt, and Reagan passed on behalf of black Americans, we have Donald J. Trump announcing his bid to run for president of the United States of America. He ended up winning that election. He got elected. He damn sure got my vote. He's damn sure getting it again in 8 days. He's earned it. And you know what Donald Trump did? He made some historic accomplishments for the black community, starting with prison reform with the First Step Act. And I don't call it prison reform, even though that's technically what it's called. You know what I call it, folks? I call it the Biden Reform Act. Because what Donald Trump did is he came in 20 or so years later and he demolished the systemically racist legislation that Senator Joe Biden passed. And there were so many things baked into this 94 crime bill that targeted black Americans that it ain't even funny. Without spending too much time on that, one of the provisions of the 94 crime bill is that there were harsher penalties for crack than there were for cocaine. Now, what's the difference? Well, cocaine is the purest form of crack, and it's the more expensive form. So if you're a black drug dealer, if you're a drug dealer of any color, you're going to treat it like an entrepreneur. You want to have the cheapest product that you can mass produce. So what these drug dealers would do is they would buy cocaine from wherever they got it, but they would break it down and water it down and dilute it. They would fill it with, baking soda, and they would do everything they could. If they got a kilo of cocaine, they could probably multiply it into many, many pounds of crack if they water it down and dilute it enough with baking soda. Why? Because they wanted to mass produce it so that they can mass sell it to their drug addict clients. They wanted quantity over quality. They didn't care about the quality of cocaine. They cared about the quantity of cocaine, because that way they could sell more rocks. They can sling more rocks and make more money. So you know what the Biden bill did? The Biden 94 crime bill, of which he said that we've pretty much done everything except hang people from jaywalking in this bill. He literally said that. You can watch the footage. Is he said, you know what? We are going to have harsher penalties. We're going to have 3-strike rule penalties for people that are caught with crack. There are people, folks, that have been spending decades in jail simply because they were caught 3 times with crack. Now, if you're Hunter Biden, if you're the son of Joe Biden, and you have enough money to do cocaine, then guess what? You're going to be protected. You're not going to get as harsh of a penalty if you're caught with cocaine than if you're caught with crack. So what the 94 crime bill did is it targeted black drug addicts so they can lock them up for decades. Imagine you're down on your luck and you fall into addiction. We're all addicted to something. Some people are addicted to food. Some are addicted to alcohol. Some people are addicted to porn. Some people are gambling addicts, workaholics, social media addicts, video game addicts, you name it. Well, unfortunately, there are certain members of our society who are addicted to drugs, to illegal drugs that are very harmful. Should they make better choices? Of course. But so should you. So should I. We should all make better choices. But the fact is, if you were a black American living in Joe Biden's America, he saw to it that you spend the rest of your life in prison if you're caught with crack. Why do you think Hunter Biden never went to prison for all the cocaine he was caught with? Well, he was kicked out of the Navy for smoking cocaine, for doing cocaine. But because it wasn't crack, because Daddy Biden put provisions in there to where you don't get locked away for years with cocaine, he was cool. He was able to go on and make $80,000 to $100,000 a month working for some company, right? That's the reward you get when you're a white Democrat and son of Joe Biden. But the fact is, Donald Trump came in 50 years after the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was passed, and he demolished that systemically racist Jim Crow KKK prison bill with the First Step Act. He gave billions of dollars to HBCUs. He got rid of the degrading fact that black colleges, historically black colleges and universities, had to get down on their knees and beg for funding every 4 years. And Barack Obama, our first black president, actually cut funding to HBCUs. Donald Trump came along and he said, you know what, guys? You don't have to beg anymore. I'm going to put in permanent automatic renewals every year for your HBCU funds. You're going to get $250 million a year in perpetuity for your historically black colleges and universities. He passed urban opportunity zones, headed up by Detroit's own Dr. Ben Carson, the most successful neurosurgeon in recent history, that was able to perform an operation on conjoined twins who were joined together at the head. He was able to successfully separate them without cutting their brains in half, without killing either of them. He ends up heading up HUD, the Department of Housing and Urban Development. And thanks to Dr. Ben Carson working in conjunction with President Donald Trump and other leaders with Black Voices for Trump, we have urban opportunity zones now, where Black Wall Street is being rebuilt in the year 2020 in urban opportunity zones. I did a previous video going through Detroit, right on Livernois, where the Trump Detroit headquarters are, talking about and showing you what the media refuses to show you, which is what a black opportunity zone looks like. Donald Trump has plummeted the black unemployment numbers to historic lows, to the lowest number that they've ever been at since the Bureau of Labor and Statistics started recording those numbers back in 1973. And that was just in his first term, folks. That's everything he did in just his first term. And I'm even incorrect saying that, because his first term doesn't end for another 4 or 5 months in January. So even before his first term ended, Donald Trump has put things in place that have moved black Americans forward for generations to come. Now, when it comes to his second term, he has put together, with the help of rapper and entrepreneur Ice Cube, the Platinum Plan, that has earmarked $500 billion for black Americans to close that wealth gap that we have suffered from for many centuries now. For all my black brothers and sisters who are pushing for reparations, who believe that we as blacks are owed reparations, well, I got some reparations for you. How about you get a slice of some Trump reparations and get your fair share of this $500 billion in the Platinum Plan that he set aside just for us. I call it the FUBU Plan. For us, by us. Ice Cube helped design it. Mr. Boys in the Hood, are we there yet? Mr. NWA. Rapper Ice Cube, a black icon in our community. One of the pioneers, one of the godfathers of hip hop, reached out to the Democrat Party and to the Republican Party with what he calls his CWBA, his contract with Black America. He reached out to the Democrats with it. You know what the Democrats told him, folks? He presented his black contract with Black America to the Democrats. And in classic Democrat fashion, they said, hey, Cube, that's a great idea. That's cute. You know, we're going to give you a gold star for effort. Go ahead and put this little gold star on your forehead. You get a gold star for effort. But here's what we want you to do. We want you to take that contract with Black America, fold it up, and put it in a little drawer until after the election. Because we don't care about it until we win. And guess what, Cube? We don't care about it after we win either. But we're going to give you lip service, and we're going to string you along, and we're going to make you think that we care about it. So just go ahead and fold that contract with Black America up, tuck it away in a dresser drawer, and after November 3rd, give us a call. Maybe we'll call you back. Maybe not. We're probably not going to call you back. But go ahead and do it anyway. We just want to be on record saying that we entertain the idea. Then Ice Cube reached out to the Grand Old Party. Ice Cube went back to his Black American roots, and he went back to the party of the black man, the original Black Lives Matter party, which is the GOP. And you know what they did? They got right back to him. They didn't give him lip service and say, hey, you get a gold star for effort that you can stick on your forehead, like they used to do in grade school when we tried our little hearts out. They said, you know what, Ice Cube? We like what you have to say in your contract with Black America. You know what we're going to do? We're actually going to implement it in our platinum plan before the election. Ice Cube tweeted that out. Ice Cube went on the Chris Cuomo show, singing the praises of the Republican Party, the friend of the black man, the friend of the fetus of color. And the fact is, Donald Trump's platinum plan was engineered large in part by Ice Cube. And you know who signed on to it a few days after that? Rapper 50 Cent, the protege of Eminem, Detroit's own Eminem, the executive producer of the popular TV show Power. You know what 50 Cent tweeted out? He said that he supports Donald Trump and he supports the platinum plan because he doesn't want to become 20 Cent. And 50, he literally said that. He said that if he votes for Joe Biden, he's going to become 20 Cent. He doesn't want to do that. So there are more black Americans that are starting to wake up, that are returning back to their original black American roots and embracing the party who embraced them, which is the GOP, the Grand Old Party, the friend and benefactor of the black man. You want to know who's got your back, folks? It's the Republican Party. The Republican Party has always had your back, going all the way back from getting rid of slavery in 1865, going all the way back to repealing Jim Crow legislation with the Civil Rights Act of 1964, going all the way back to Donald Trump doing more for the black community than Abraham Lincoln. And that is a fact, guys. That ain't rhetoric. You don't believe me? Look at the record. Look at the facts. Look at what he's done for us. He has repealed Title IX funding of Planned Parenthood, a eugenicist organization originally named the Negro Project that was founded by Margaret Sanger, who wanted to strategically target black Americans because she was a eugenicist. She believed in black population control. And the best way that she can control us is rather than herding us up in concentration camps and putting us in gas chambers and putting us in ovens the way Hitler did with Jews. She said, you know what? We're going to engineer a scheme to get these black Americans to abort and contracept themselves right out of existence. And we're going to make sure that they're stuck at 13% of the population for as long as they're here. And that is why we have been here for 400 years, going all the way back to 1619. And after 400 years, we are still stuck at 13% of the population. Why? Because of the black population control scheme, headed up by Planned Parenthood. Well, guess what? Donald J. Trump has been fighting against that by taking the teeth, taking the fangs and the venom out of Planned Parenthood, our worst enemy in this country. So for all of my fellow black Americans, I know you don't like the way Trump talks on Twitter. I know you don't like his hairdo. I know you don't like all the supposedly racist things that everybody says that he has said, which have been proven and debunked time after time. But my fellow black Americans, your brother Bobby Hesley is asking you to try something new. Your black brother Bobby Hesley is asking you to make black history in your own life and in our country by voting for Donald J. Trump. You've been voting Democrat the last 60 years, and where has that gotten you? Try something new this one time. You don't have to tell everybody that you voted for Donald Trump. Because I will tell you this, guys, I've been working very closely with the Trump campaign in their Detroit office. Joe Biden does not have campaign offices in Detroit because he doesn't care about black Americans. He assumes that we're just going to show up and vote for him. Why? Because we ain't black unless we do that, right? But Donald Trump has set up an urban community center in Detroit on Livernois that you can come by anytime. And I have been going door to door with them. I have been doing poll watching. Do you guys know that there are currently investigations going on with certain Detroit precincts where I was able to uncover some irregularities? I'm just going to leave it at that. That's all I'm at liberty to go into. Black votes are being suppressed in Detroit. Black votes matter, folks, especially in Michigan, which is a swing state. The Trumps have been in Michigan the last 2 or 3 weeks campaigning hard. Donald Trump's going to be here tomorrow in Lansing. I'll be there. All of Trump's kids have been here. And they are campaigning hard in Michigan because it's a swing state. And the fact is, black votes are being suppressed. And I'm fighting against that, working in conjunction with Trump's Detroit campaign office. So guys, I believe that in the year 2020, we have a secret underground railroad of black Republican support for Donald Trump. But there's lots of black businesses, there's lots of black Americans that are afraid to vocalize their support for Trump because they don't want to be ostracized by their own community. They don't want to be made fun of. They don't want to be accused of being a sellout, an Uncle Tom, a coon, all these terrible things, all these terrible names that us black conservatives are called. But that's okay, guys, because the Underground Railroad played a huge part in ending slavery. And I believe that the Trump Underground Railroad, of all this secret black support for Donald Trump that I am seeing firsthand every time I go to Trump's Detroit office and help with outreach, is going to give the Democrats a rude awakening on the morning of November 4th. Their power over us is breaking, folks. Our Democrat pharaohs are losing their power over us thanks to Donald Trump, and I'm doing everything I can to help that happen. So to close, I want to encourage my black Americans to return to your original American roots. When you get some time, I want you to study the Reconstruction era. Look up the phrase Reconstruction era, and you can see in detail how it was the Republican Party that welcomed us with open arms, that gave us positions of power and authority so that we can increase the gains of freedom that we made with the ending of slavery. And if you think about it, folks, there was a period of 100 years where there was not a single Democrat senator or governor or mayor in the state of Georgia for a whole 100 years. That shows you how much Democrats want blacks to have power. So I love you guys. I love my black Americans. Go back to your roots, guys. FUBU 1.0, for us, by us. Return to the party that was established to free you from slavery, to free you, black Americans. The Republican Party was established for black people. It was not established for white people. It was established specifically as the party of abolition. I love you guys. God bless. Trump 2020. Vote Republican. It's the blackest thing you can do. Black Voices for Trump, signing off. God bless.